Is that? I'm a little shorter than most speakers. So, hello. Can I ask, how many people here have done any development in D3? Awesome. Have you migrated any projects to version 4 of D3? Okay, I'll get you started. Okay. So who am I? I'm a computer scientist. I specialize in data visualization. At work, sometimes I let them call me a full stack engineer. Basically, I just want the data, and I want to find the patterns, and I want to make it easier for other people to see and share the patterns. I started out developing science visualizations, doing a lot of animations and simulations, and started doing more and more programming for the viz. I had been doing database programming before that, but the visual aspect and code coming together didn't really happen for me until, I guess, about midway through my career. I'm also a generative artist. I create art based on principles of chemistry and physics and patterns in strings, and other things that amuse me from time to time. The image on the right is a 3D visualization of a folded protein. The image on the left is an art piece of mine inspired by protein folding, but it's titled Self-Drawing Code. I had just learned about code reflection, and I thought, how cool would it be if a program could look at its own code and draw a self-portrait? So I took the string of the code itself and then had that code render an image of itself, and it would bend like a protein would at wherever there was a space or there was an amino acid that forced it to shape in a certain way. So this kind of gives you a bit of an idea of where my brain is. So there's a lot of changes in D3 v4. This is a 30-ish minute talk. I'm not going to be able to cover it all, just a little tiny bit. And because I believe it's important to put warnings on your data if it's not the final release, this is not actual data. This is a mock-up. So why migrate to version 4 of D3? As a computer scientist, there are a lot of really cool things about it, but even just as a daily practitioner of having to write code that I don't have to rewrite, that I can use and reuse again and again for different purposes, I'm very excited about the more modular nature of the library and how it's built to allow you to make your code more modular without jerry-rigging things. The syntax is a lot cleaner, it's simpler. There are so many improvements, like the quad tree, which is no longer recursive. It's now iterative, so it won't crash a browser if you have 50,000 points that you're rendering. And there are libraries, like D3 annotations. Has anybody heard of D3 annotations? Yes, it is awesome sauce. So what are the biggest barriers? Getting stuck in your old ways of thinking. D3 works very differently now. Thinking that a change is bigger than it is, when it's actually fairly simple and you can get a little intimidated. Or the opposite is you completely underestimate how big a change is and you get confused and frustrated. And trust me, I get confused and frustrated all the time, but I just keep going. And then sometimes it has nothing to do with the change, but it could be another detail entirely, and you get stuck running down a rabbit hole. So what can we do? Start small. Update one little piece at a time, and then put them together. Embrace modular code. Enjoy the small victories. Persist. You need those little endorphin rushes when something finally works. That will carry you through all the frustration. Read the documentation. Join the Slack channel, join the Google groups, ask questions, go to the D3 meetups. There are lots of people who have been struggling with this and are generous with their time and their brains and just want to help everybody do their best work. Also, play. Have fun with your bugs. Does something weird happen? Did you forget to clear the canvas? And so all of your dots are being rendered again and again. That kind of looks cool. So maybe take a little break, play with it, make something that you might even want to share. Then come back to the real code. Just take a little bit of time. It helps. So I'm not going to be able to go into a lot of detail in this short time, but I have been writing some articles about how to migrate, including how to get started with plugins and using Rollup and other tools with D3 v4, and they're up on my Medium site. I have more in progress, but they take a long time to write, and I promise you they are coming. But I have 2 already. So let's take a case point. This is a fairly simple scatter plot. It's not particularly well designed. It doesn't fulfill a specific function, but it's got a lot of the simple elements that most visualizations will have. In this particular example, which is it's in my GitHub for the articles, the user can change the chart variables, so I have some transitions, some easing, I've got axis changes. So these are all 3 things that have changed in D3. And so picking a simple project that tackled a few simple changes, I thought that was a good way to maintain my own sanity while learning this new library after I'd already learned the previous version of it. So the first thing you want to do is get the new library. I know this sounds silly, but you have to start somewhere. If you give yourself a starting point, then you have that benchmark to look back on and say, oh yeah, I did that thing too. These kinds of motivation techniques are very important to keep going with code, especially when the landscape is changing out from underneath you all the time. When you import your script tag into your HTML document, I highly recommend that you indicate that this is a version 4 project. There are a number of reasons for this. First, if you're making migrations, it helps you to keep your code bases organized and you know exactly what you're looking at. Another reason is because Block Builder uses this tag to find specific library examples, specific versions. If you want to be found, use this tag. One of the most universal changes, like they're all throughout the library, are these namespace flattening. This is, once you get used to it, it really makes a lot more sense, but you have to do a lot of it. If you figure out which parts that you need to change, you can probably do a simple search replace. It's pretty straightforward. Axes are now automatically styled. So you don't have to mess with like exactly where the axes are. You just say, I want it axes bottom, axes left, axes right. It takes care of all that. If you want to do anything specific, you can take care of that in your style sheet. Transitions is another thing that has changed. It's a little more complicated than others, but it really boils down to another syntax change. Instead of sign-in-out, it's just d3.ease sign in out. So here's another project that I worked on, which was slightly different in complication, and this is mapping. I've been doing a lot of mapping lately. And in this piece, which is based on when I work, but I'm using an open data source. This one is the San Francisco parking meters. It's a small-ish data set. About the chunk that I took was about 20,000 points. My first iteration was done in D3 v3. And because I didn't have 30,000 dots, I thought that I could probably get by with SVG instead of Canvas. And for my base map layer, I used the Mapbox tile server with the developer's license. The migration to version 4 was pretty simple. I was surprised. Why was this so easy? I mean, it took me about an hour, even with like just fiddling and making sure things were just right. The reason is because most of the complexity of this particular project was handled by Leaflet, not D3. So then I was given a much bigger data set. I was like, okay, SVG, it just won't work anymore. So I started diving into using Canvas with leaflet and mapping, and discovered this great open source solution called Canvas Layer. And the link, my slides will be online, so you'll be able to find this. This looks a lot like drawing to canvas in D3. If you've ever, it's almost exactly the same. So that was an easy transition for me to make. The key point here is this little part that leaflet gives you. It's a thing, it's beautiful. It really is. What it does is it translates the XY coordinates to Cartesian coordinates, to lat long coordinates, and it does it back and forth. So when you're figuring out where your dot should be on the map, you just plug the lat long coordinates in that, and then it tells you where to plot it on the screen. So I'm using Canvas. I can't attach mouse events like you can to SVG, which is one of the appealing aspects of D3, being able to just mouse over the visual elements. So what I did is I'm using the D3 quad tree to do a lookup of where that dot is on the map and where it is in the container. So I get the location of the mouse on the screen. I plug that into the function for getting, this is not the same, I put the wrong function up here. There's an inverse function for getting the lat long. And then I've got all of my points sorted in a quad tree, so it's nlog n time to find which data element matches to that point on the screen. Then I was asked, well, can you put in additional layers from other tile servers? I'm like, okay. And then I discovered Esri Leaflet, which is a plugin. This required a newer version of Leaflet. So this was my starting point with using Esri Leaflet and Canvas and the newer version of Leaflet. Looks kind of messy, but I found that it was easier to insert some of my code into an existing example rather than trying to wrap their example around my code. So then I just sized the dots based on zoom level, and I colored the meters by their map colors, cap colors. Then I saw these weird black dots. Like, why are they clustered so closely? Do I have an error in my data? Have I somehow failed? They were motorcycle parking spots. So there's nothing like getting your data visualized to see the things that you don't expect, and then go look for the ground truth to see, well, what is really there? Okay, so my third example is the very, very difficult one, and I'm just going to mention how I fixed it. It's a game based on biochemistry. The first version was almost done when Mike Bostock announced version 4. It's got a physics engine, it's a particle system, a lot of interaction, some very complex game mechanics behind it. And I was working on this with a physicist and a biochemist, so they were my domain experts. It's not your average D3 project. There's no data. It's purely a simulation. So why did I use D3? Well, why not? I wanted to improve my D3 skills and push them into areas I never would have explored if I hadn't been trying something that I hadn't seen done before. And in this, I'm combining SVG elements and Canvas elements in the same particle system. For this one, I had to completely rewrite my physics engine. There was no easy fix. It took me a long time. I dug into the source code for D3, and I learned a lot. Once I got my physics engine working, then I started adding the game elements back in, and from then on, it's been easy, smooth sailing, moving forward. What are the benefits of migrating to D3? In this case, my code was so much better organized. Before version 4 was announced, I was starting to program my own Python scripts to help manage my JavaScript snippets, because I was really frustrated with how JavaScript is so spaghetti-like. I have better timer management. The Quad tree is massively faster, and there are so many improvements, I would need at least an hour to list, just to bullet point list them through for you. I want to remind everybody, I'm going off script, well, it's my script, but I'm going off topic a little bit. It's really easy to get caught up in the technical details of what we do. I can spend hours and hours digging through documentation of a new code library, and I am so happy. But when I do that, I lose sight of what I'm trying to accomplish with that code. Data visualization is about finding and understanding patterns. It is a tool for problem solving. It's fine to get caught up in the details of how we make that happen, but it's essential that you remember what the end goal is. Or, when you create a visualization, only you may understand what it means. And sometimes it can even save lives. Going way back in time to 1854, Dr. John Snow was trying to figure out what was causing a cholera epidemic in London. This is the first known map that I know of that was done in particularly this way. He plotted all of the cases of cholera on a map because he had a hunch that he could figure out that if he saw the clustering of where people were physically located, that might give him a clue as to what was causing all of these deaths. And it worked. This is the main pump. There were a few other pumps that were also contaminated. But he used this visualization to find where he should be taking water samples and examining under a microscope. This was a tool for saving lives. Thank you. Wow, that went really fast. I do want to show you one thing. Something fun. So this is an example of playing with a bug and making it look pretty. This is just a bug. So the gray lines, those are the uncleared dots of particles that are drawn on canvas, whereas the colored dots that are obviously dots, those are SVG elements. So, any questions? There's somebody in the back? Nope. Oh, okay.